All yours.
All right, I'll start over with that. Our speaker tonight is Ryan Schell. Ryan got his bachelor's in geology from the University of Arkansas, did his PhD at Wright State University in Dayton in Chuck Ciampaglio's lab. He's a research associate at the Cincinnati Museum Center in the Department of Vertebrate Paleontology. He's done research on Paleozoic chondrichthyans and on cephalopod biomechanics. And I know he recently relocated to Michigan and has a new position. I guess that's with the Forest Service still.
That's right.
Yeah. And the title of his talk tonight is Paleozoic Fishes of the Illinois Basin. Ryan.
All righty, thank you for that. Yes, for those of you not familiar with me, that biography, that brief biography, pretty much sums it up. The only change in my life since I agreed to do this is that I'm now working as a physical scientist for the United States Forest Service. I'm based in Traverse City, Michigan, and my area of responsibility is going to be geological resources in the Huron-Manistee National Forest region of the northern part of the Mitten, and also the Shawnee National Forest at the southern tip of Illinois, which positions me pretty good to kind of segue into this talk. Paleozoic fishes of the Illinois Basin. I'm specifically going to target the Burlington Keokuk bone bed, since a lot of the things that I would have to say about fish faunas of the rest of the Illinois Basin can kind of be typified here. And also it seems like a huge amount of biodiversity is locked up within the Burlington Keokuk bone bed as well. It's also pretty accessible to collectors compared to other more well-known or lesser known fish faunas. So just a brief rundown for everyone. The Paleozoic era is the era we're talking about. It began 540 million years ago. It ended in the Permian around 250 million years ago. And the vertebrate record of Illinois kind of begins in the early or middle Devonian and works its way all the way up to the top of the Carboniferous system within the Illinois Basin. I'm sure if the Permian was present, we would find fishes there, but it's pretty consistent, regular deposition of vertebrate faunas from the Devonian and Carboniferous as we go up. And this is a really important slice of a really important period of time. If you think about the Phanerozoic eon, the eon of the last 500 million years, it kind of began during this period with the faunal overturn at the end of the Ediacaran and the beginning of the Cambrian. Vertebrates and chordates in general evolved probably in the middle or late Cambrian around this time, and they began to diversify rapidly into groups and into body plans that we know today. Around the middle Silurian, which is, I think, about as old as the surface rocks of the Illinois Basin get, at least in Illinois. I know you can get into the upper Ordovician in Iowa, but around the middle Silurian, we start seeing animals evolving jaws for the first time, vertebrates evolving jaws, I should say. And by the end of the Devonian, these animals were up on land. It was a very, very rapid period of vertebrate diversification that has, huge ramifications today, since, for example, we're all on land now having this talk. I scavenged this from Alabama, from a talk I did at Alabama, and I have a typo in there, so that's cool. Moving on, let's look at this transition from the earliest jawed vertebrates up to kind of everything we know and love today. Looking at this cladogram real quick, I just want to point out the Sarcopterygians way up top in the right, the lobe fin fishes. This contains our seal.
Pardon me.
Yeah.
Your slides aren't changing on my Zoom talk.
Uh-oh.
I don't know if. Yeah.
Are they changing for anyone else? Oh no.
Nope.
Okay.
Yeah.
You're going to want to start the
Let's
slideshow and reshare, close and reshare on the slideshow.
Oh yeah. That's,
Okay.
yeah. That's what's going on.
All right. Let me just close it all the way down. Advance. When I advance, we should get to a paleo art piece. Did anyone see the slides change?
Yes.
Me.
Cool. All right. So this is kind of the series of nodes and clades branching off from agnathan animals, vertebrates without jaws, upwards to the things that we call fishes, the vertebrates we call fishes that we know and love today. From the right here, we have the Sarcopterygians. That contains our lungfishes, our rhizodonts, which are extinct, our coelacanths, and also all of the tetrapods, the tetrapodomorphs, the synapsids, the reptiles, the mammals, the amphibians, everything in this group would eventually diversify starting at the late middle Devonian and on up. We're trying to stay in the water here. So the next group that are paired with them are the Actinopterygians, the ray fin fishes. These are in the osteichthyans, the bony fishes, and they are at a node with the chondrichthyans, the cartilaginous fishes. This node, depending on how interested you are in the paleontology of teeth versus scales, probably is a late Silurian node. So these evolutionary events were churning and working well before the Devonian began. Within the chondrichthyes, we have two groups, the holocephalians and the elasmobranchii. There's also the acanthodians, or the spiny sharks. They do appear in the fossil record, especially in the Devonian. We have them in the Burlington Keokuk. I'm not going to talk about them too much now. Ditto for most of the other fishes, just because the Mississippian, the lower Carboniferous, was very much a chondrichthyan world. It's the age of sharks in many ways. So know that these are here. They're generally thought to be primitive elasmobranch or elasmobranch-like animals now, but it's a whole order, or actually a system of 3 orders of fishes that evolved, prospered, and then went extinct during this period of time. Holocephali are still alive today. Elasmobranchs are still alive today. As we go down, we become more primitive. We have the placoderms, which may or may not be paraphyletic, meaning they may or may not have been descended from a common ancestor, paired with the eunathostomes. A lot of research is going on in the late Silurian of China right now to kind of tease out how this evolutionary process separated out. And then once we get beyond that, we see animals without jaws. So this transition that I talked about in an earlier slide kind of began at or before this node where I pulled the placoderms out just because it would be easier to draw them as monophyletic, up to this split between the major groups of chondrichthyans and the major groups of osteichthyans. So these are a lot of very, very important major steps for evolution, pulling out the bony fishes, deciding whether a skeleton is more useful in certain ecological circumstances versus not, is the sort of evolutionary, for lack of a better term, decision making that is happening down at the base of these cladistic trees. And that's what I think really gives power to the work done on Paleozoic vertebrates, especially Paleozoic fishes, because we find ourselves understanding very, very deep, complex things really, really at these crucial moments for evolution. And with that, I wanted to look more specifically at the Carboniferous period. We have a lot of very strange animals, a lot of very unrecognizable ecosystems and animals. This paleobiology graph here is biodiversity of vertebrates in basically the Illinois Basin. For those of you unfamiliar with the paleobiology database, it's a big NSF funded program where they geolocate papers that are published on faunas. And I think they have around 200,000 papers done over the last 150 years, and they can put in maps of occurrences of animals. And you can see that in the Illinois region, I say region because their area of interest is square, so I can only zoom in so far and still have things targeted well. We have vertebrates in the Devonian and Carboniferous, but really, really in the Carboniferous, we see a huge spike in diversity. This is true for the Illinois Basin. It's true across the board as well, as Pangea, I guess at this point, was slowly starting to assemble. The continents were kind of centered in the map, so there was a lot of warm continental shelves going on. If we look at this paleo art on the left, we can see some of the animals that I'm talking about for Carboniferous. For Carboniferous seas, we have crinoids, also known as sea lilies, which are very abundant during this time and actually abundant throughout huge sections of rock in the Illinois Basin. Very strange animals, these things with the fins growing out of their necks. These are the Iniopterygians, which are thought to be some kind of primitive holocephalian, but there's still some debate in the brain cases of these animals with exactly how they're fit in. This is Adestus, there's 2 or 3 species of Adestus. I'm aware mostly of Adestus vorax and heinrichi from the Illinois Basin. This is also called the coal shark from collectors. I have some teeth packed away, but they're really hard for me to find since I just moved. And it's also called the scissor jaw shark. This is a Eugeniodont holocephalian, another non-shark that was convergent on a very predatory lifestyle. I should say now, by the way, the primary characteristic to determine a holocephalian from a elasmobranch is related to the jaw suspension. So we have a, how do I want to do this? We have a cranium sitting here, a neurocranium, and we have jaws underneath. A holocephalian's jaw is more or less fixed, more or less either fused or hard ligamented onto the neurocranium. So its jaw swings forward like this. Whereas an elasmobranch, think great white shark, its jaw is able to move independent of its cranium. So that's all we're really talking about there. Stethecanthus, another very primitive shark, originally thought to be an elasmobranch, but now probably also considered to be a holocephalian, and then larger, more typical elasmobranch sharks also on the picture. Zooming in further to kind of narrow the window down, so we're not going to be here for 3 hours talking about 150 species of animals. We're looking at the Burlington and Keokuk formations. This is a cross section through Iowa, and we are seeing Mississippian units dipping down towards the bottom of the Illinois Basin. This is all coded, I think, roughly to topography, but these units are exposed in a lot of parts of eastern eastern Iowa, in the Keokuk area, and also in westernmost Illinois along the Mississippi River Valley. I went ahead and colored the contact red because we're going to be talking specifically about that contact. It's not a very hard contact. There's probably a lag deposit that's up to 1 meter thick across this entire region. So the Burlington does not end with the Keokuk. The Burlington ends with a lag that is, fragments of a little of one, a little of the other, and then it grades after that 1 meter into the Keokuk as we move up section. And again, just kind of looking at some of the paleoart of this time, this is a very typical like crinoid forest type ecosystem. The sea lilies were growing with such density and with such diversity that you could almost imagine a coral reef made out of these entire communities of these echinoderms. We know from deep sea submersible expeditions in the 70s and 80s that they probably were diversified based on height above the substrate. So different ones, different stalked ones, the free swimming ones, I mean, who knows? But the stalked ones probably were specialized within certain zones above the substrate. I've located a couple of these in the Mississippian, the upper Mississippian of Kentucky, that were probably coming up on 8 feet. So we're talking like a pretty full complex system of animals over a nearly 2 or 3 meter stretch of the water column coming off the bottom. And then you have diversity among those animals. There are lots of crushing animals, both fishes and non-fishes, and there's a whole ecosystem of animals feeding off of that.
Ryan?
Yeah.
I think if memory serves, that was the Durophagus predators was the demise of the camerate crinoids.
Okay.
It really went down in diversity. Just a comment.
Yeah, that's good to know. We do see diversity among cochleodontiform fishes especially explode right around the time that crinoid diversity also explodes, and then kind of fall down a little bit out of phase with each other. So that's really interesting. As far as I know, and this might not be 1000% true anymore, but for the longest time, the most Durophagus fishes of this time could not be proven to have fed on crinoids, which is a deep frustration for me as a paleontologist, right? We have these animals living in these forests made out of sea urchins with flat crushing teeth. This is also a period of time when crinoids really diversified their ornament and their armament against presumed predation and parasitism. Some of these, like the, I'm on a tangent, but whatever, we have time. Some of these involve like what are called anal chimneys, which are these long tubes for the anus to get away from the mouth. And these were covered in spikes. It's thought that these spikes were more about pushing snails, parasitic snails, away from the animal. But some of these spikes, like we see in Delocrinus, are big, multi-inch wide points that were fixed at the base and rooted into the camera itself. And while we don't know exactly who they were trying to push away, we do have our suspicions. This is just a little bit of our best guess at the stratigraphy, or not the stratigraphy, at the depositional environment here. We're pretty sure what we're seeing is a starved platform, or more accurately, a starved carbonate ramp. The Burlington was a deeply, deeply carbonate heavy ecosystem with not a huge amount of input from the continent around it, not a lot of siliciclastics, very few of those phyllosilicate minerals, although we do see some glauconite. And right at the top of the Burlington, it's pretty clear that it was no longer a good time for carbonate to be deposited, for carbonate to grow, for marine snow to build up, for corals and crinoids and brachiopods to grow. It was all happening, but obviously at a pretty reduced rate as beds got thinner and thinner and more truncated. And when that happens, you occasionally get these kind of starved platform bone beds, which I think is at least a big portion of the story of what happens here, where nectonic animals are swimming above a seabed that is not having carbonates growing, and because they're dying and they're dropping their body parts and they're making their own marine snow, they become a bigger and bigger percentage of the sediment that is actually accumulating. What's really nice about the Burlington Keokuk is that the material, the vertebrate material, and I have a hand sample here too if you guys want to look, it always preserves black on white. As we move away from Iowa and into Illinois, the limestones actually get cleaner and cleaner with fewer and fewer clay minerals in them. So the limestones get whiter and whiter, but the teeth remain black. So you get these deposits of teeth. There's some kind of lag forming ability, base of the bed currents probably going on as well, because we have teeth at various stages of erosion. Some of them eroded almost down to the point of being pebbles, whereas others are very, very fresh. This could be occurring on a starved platform as well, if a tooth is, you know, dropping and landing on the sediment and being stuck there for 100,000 years. But it could also be that we're having a like base of the water column currents kind of moving everything around by density as well. And what we get are these massive, thick, about a meter thick assemblages, where as much as I would say maybe 20% by mass in some places of these stones are made entirely out of these base of the tree Mississippian vertebrates. And this kind of leads us into another one of the ways in which the Paleozoic is very typified at this site, and that there's a lot of diversity, but there's also a lot of unfinished work. Starting in around maybe 1859, with a little bit of a hiatus during the Civil War, up to the turn of the century, there was a lot of work done on these very, very findable animals. I mean, you saw the hand sample that I brought up with a huge tooth or bone sticking out of it. And so there was a ton of material recovered, a ton of material was written and illustrated. Draftsmen were brought in to make these very, very complex, beautiful drawings of individual teeth and even systems of jaws. This is probably a primitive eugeniodont, but it's not 100% clear. However, the science that was done in this area was kind of a product of its time, meaning that there were a lot of problems that could not have been foreseen at the time that are continuing to plague us today. Individual species were named by as much as little as a single tooth. It was not always clear in the writing whether there was enough morphological variance to justify the erection of a new species, or maybe this is just a different place in the mouth, or maybe this tooth is worn. Like, there was a lot of shooting from the hip that was going on. Large numbers of species were lost. One of the main collectors, Orestes St. John, kept a lot of holotypes in his private collection, and when he died, those specimens just completely vanished. And this problem happened like around the year 1900. So it's not like there are any sitting in an attic anywhere. They've had 120 years to be shuffled around and we still can't find them. And then there's the other issue of just what we name this lag fauna, which is a struggle that we have in other lags, but it's one that has yet to really be teased out. We have, is this a lowermost Keokuk bone bed, or is this an uppermost Burlington bone bed? And this is normally not a huge issue until we talk about the animals that were here. And we're talking huge biodiversity, like as many as 500 species named. There's a very common polycephalian out here called Deltotus, which is, I'm pretty sure, the tooth, the fragment that I showed you in my hand sample. And I think there are like 70 or 80 species named of Deltotus, a large number of them with missing holotypes, a large number of them known from only one tooth. As many as 40 species are known from the Keokuk Formation alone. But why not the Burlington? There's another 26 to 36 known from there as well. What are we seeing? What is this pattern? What is this nuance? And how do we tease out that nuance is an additional wrinkle to any field studies that could be going on at this site. And so with that, we're coming to the field guide of the section for Paleozoic sharks of Illinois, especially these very, very findable Paleozoic sharks. And this is the only attempt to really tease out these answers that has been done since at least 1905 that I got to be a part of. This is Matthew Honig's 2019 Masters of Science thesis at Wright State University. And what was tried to do with this is going to kind of be the structure for the rundown and Audubon field guide section for this bone bed, is that he did a pretty good review of the taxonomy over the last 150 years. We tried to figure out which names are real, which names are still valid, which names are not, where are holotypes, what does that mean, how many of them were actually just typos and misprinted from previous works, another problem. We tried to untangle the issue of sharks being reported as Burlington or Keokuk, at least as far as the bone bed is concerned. I believe very strongly that these were deposited during Burlington time. And the sedimentology seems to agree with me as well. People who collect geodes in the area might be familiar with the Keokuk for being absolutely loaded with geodes. And as far as I can tell, that huge abundance of quartz happens pretty quickly after the bone bed, like within 6 or 7 feet. So it seems a little strange to me that, 40 Deltotus species would be found way up in the middle of the Keokuk when there's almost no way for them to have preserved in that kind of system. We also tried to figure out how many species were within the Burlington Keokuk bone bed itself. And to that end, we ended up exploring shark faunas in the field, mostly in quarries, but some road cuts also tell some of this story. We hit a couple of road cuts in Iowa, 2 quarries in Iowa for sure, and also a quarry in, I believe, Biggsville, Illinois. The way we sampled this is we took bulk samples, very similar to this massive chunk that I have here. If we have anything on the surface, we'd prep them out with hand tools. This was all done by hand under a microscope, but there are better hand tools out there, as many of you know. And we also did a lot of acid dissolution. Everything done for this study was cooked in 5-gallon buckets that were loaded with 3 to 4 gallons of 10% formic or 10% acetic acid. We often cut in a small percentage of sodium phosphate, I think, or zinc phosphate. The thought is that because all vertebrate skeletal remains are hydroxylapatite, which is a phosphate mineral, that we can keep the phosphorus in equilibrium, even though all these other chemical reactions in the dissolution are going on. There's some research out there to show that this works, but there's also some research out there to suggest that maybe it's wishful thinking. Maybe it would take a lot more acid than you could imagine to actually do damage to a tooth at this point. So the jury's still a little bit out on that particular part of the method, but we do it. We do it until we're sure that it's not worth doing. The stuff that we cut it with isn't exactly expensive. And then we went through and we did our best to review stuff that had been collected before. The Wright State Paleo collection is pretty extensive on this particular area. So we did a lot of naming, a lot of systematic paleontology to figure this out. So let's get through what we found. We're going to start with the holocephali. And what I tried to do is start with what are assumed to be more primitive lineages of holocephalians and work our way up and up and up. As many of you might know, the only holocephalians alive today are the chimeriformes, or the ratfishes. These are very strange deep sea fishes, 20 or 30 species alive today. So they're around, but we just don't see a lot of them. And they're all durophagous. So expect a lot of experimentation very early on, but as we get closer to those chimeriform fishes, durophagy is going to become more and more popular. Kind of in the same way that the most primitive dinosaurs were probably carnivorous and then they diversified into other diets. So we're starting here with holocephalians. We for sure have Stethecanthus, which is kind of the typical Simoraiform holocephalian. This whole group of shark-like animals, very fusiform bodies, very shark-like bodies, but with these, not all of them, but most of them with variations on the dorsum of the body. Falcatus has like a J-hook spine. Stethecanthus has what we call an anvil. All of this is thought to be related to mating, though it's never 100% clear how. We actually have a group of these mating from the Bear Gulch Lagerstadt, but it's still not super clear exactly how this worked with positioning. It's thought with this group that the male would probably rub the vent with it, the vent of the female with its anvil, but it varies depending on the rest of the dorsal anatomy of this group. A quick thing to look at the teeth. The teeth are very triangular. They're very triangular. They're very what we call cladodont in design, which means that they're triangular, very typically sharky looking teeth with usually side cusps to kind of give them a trident shape, which is thought to stabilize the tooth once it punctures. So the tooth comes in, the main cusp and then the side cusp like prevent rotation. The main thing to look at here when identifying this group are these. Can you guys see my mouse when I'm circling stuff?
Yes. Yes.
Cool. So if we look at this group, this picture here, we're on the labial side, that's the lip side. And we see that the central cusp bows way out, almost like a banana. And it has these parallel striae or cristae going up it. That is like a dead giveaway for Stethecanthus, and especially for other Simoraiform groups. Another thing to notice is that these cusplets are usually not connected. So it's a base with multiple cusplets on it, as opposed to a base with a single cusp that is super, super diversified in its shape, if that makes sense. Moving on, these are the petalodontiforms. These form a group called the Paraselacians, which are near sharks. They're shark-like predators, kind of doing the predation that sharks do now, but with a completely different set of teeth and jaws and a whole bunch of adaptations. The one I have figured for you here is actually from the Burlington Keokuk. This is Antilotus, and honestly, this is pretty typical for the petalodontiforms. We have this wide, low tooth with a low crown. It's very, don't know why we didn't take a picture of it. It's very anterior posteriorly compressed, so think almost like a fish scale. And these teeth were adapted primarily for like nipping and slicing. Variations on this form exist, but honestly, once you get a sense, especially of like Antilotus or the type species for this order, Petalotus ohioensis, you kind of know what to expect. Ornamentation can be more present or less present. This crown can be crenellated or serrated. This crown can have like little flares at the end, and those are all in the petalodonts and the like priestodonts. These teeth can be fused together partially or fully into tooth families. We see that with the Pennsylvanian Permian Megatinopatalis and the priestodonts, Priestodus. They can be stretched laterally. So just, take this already half-turned football and stretch it into a loaf of bread. That's what Comatotus looks like. We can grow them or shrink them overall. Tanaotus is the other one that we were able to locate in this bone bed, and it's kind of a more lower, chunkier, hatchet-shaped version of this. These teeth belong to pretty large animals. We find them, I think the scale bar here was 0.5 centimeter, but we find Paleozoic, approaching 3 inches wide in some fossil localities. Comatotus even bigger, but obviously lower because they're more stretched out. They can be very, very large teeth or very, very small teeth. This is Helotus. We are starting to form pretty recognizable teeth, all things considered, and we're moving towards Durophagy. This is a singular tooth, a singular crown. It's covered in a tubular dentine, which is what produces all of these tubes going through. We'll see that in other more crown group holocephalians. We see it in the chimeriforms today. And we have mostly a crushing tooth with maybe a little bit of a gripping ability. You could almost imagine a cladodont tooth that has been sanded down and molded into something like this. The one on the left is from the Burlington Keokuk. The one on the right is from Southern Ireland, which is kind of basically the same depositional system, but at the time it would have been maybe 500-600 miles up the continental shelf. And we see kind of not a lot of variation in this group. They appear to have pretty homodont dentitions. We see a little bit of variation, like the overall blueprint of what this knobby shape was built on, but really, like, Helotus is a little bit enigmatic because the anatomy of the teeth give us so little to work with. Next, we have Venustotus. This is probably an early Eugeniodont. The Eugeniodonts we met before when I talked about Adestus heinrichi and Adestus thorax, the scissor jaw shark. This is an animal with a lot of ornamentation. We actually find them pretty commonly. If you remember my hand sample, the one that I have cleaned up there is a Venustotus. There are probably around 20 named species from Iowa and Illinois together during this time. It's not super clear how well this was done, how the teeth fit together, which knob is worth discussing as a species level difference versus, intraspecific variation or morphology within the mouth and all of that. So this is plagued by the fuzziness that taxonomy in the 1800s kind of created for us. But I don't know, as far as collecting, I think this is a beautiful tooth because of how well ornamented it is. Next, we're moving on to Deltotus and Samotus, if I can click correctly, both fully Durophagous now. We are no longer looking at any kind of gripping ability. Two different orders though. Deltotus, the one that is shaped like the Greek letter delta, which is a triangle on the left. It's a cochleodontiform. Part of a system of genera Cochleotus and Helotus also, and Sandilotus. Had a very small number of teeth, I think maybe 12 teeth total, 3 for every jaw quarter. And the jaws were kind of covered in this structure, this thing that we call a tooth plate instead of a single tooth. And even like the groove from which chondrichthyan teeth are generated from, the way shark teeth spiral out, we see kind of on, I think it's on this side of this tooth. It needs to be rotated, but it wasn't in the thing that I pulled this from. It's actually like coiling this tissue out. And then Samotus is probably similarly Durophagous, but with a completely different playbook. Samotus has large, flat, square teeth, similar to like a mylobatid stingray, and it packed them into these pavements of teeth, also similar to a mylobatid stingray. But beyond that, we don't really know a lot about Samotus, other than that it presumably had a huge body size. Like some of these teeth, especially from the United Kingdom, are about the size of a dollar bill folded in half. And so if you extrapolate that out, let's say this animal just had like a 6-pack of teeth in the middle of its mandible, we're talking about a surface area like comparable to a woolly mammoth tooth. So the head of this thing had to have been huge. And we actually find, I believe it's Deltotus grandis in the Burlington. I don't know if we find it in the Burlington Keokuk bone bed, but we for sure find it in the Burlington itself, that also had like massive surface area, like as much as this much surface area per tooth. So these were very big animals, presumably grazing on the invertebrate fauna that was around them. We assume that to be crinoids, but I don't think we can prove that presently. There we go. Now we're jumping into the elasmobranchii. I told you before we were going to skip over the acanthodians for now, but we'll come back to them. First one we have is Thrinacotis. This is very similar to the modern frilled shark. We think it's convergent evolution, but the similarities are very, very striking in terms of the teeth, in terms of the way the teeth fit into the jaw. On the upper here, this is Michael Ginter's reconstruction of Phoebotus from the upper Devonian of Morocco. And then this is Phoebotus in tooth form. Very, very small teeth, usually like not wider than a couple of millimeters, but we're fortunate in the Carboniferous to get animals like Thrinacotis. That's what we see here. These big trident-like teeth with kind of these hand grips coming back, huge roots sliding back to fit into these jaws down here. These are a little bit bigger, maybe up to like half an inch long from the root to the labial edge there. They almost never come out complete. I've seen them complete in block instead of in residues once you dissolve them, but even then, once you get like this part prepped, it's more or less impossible to like clean it down to this. Most collectors just kind of leave a ball of limestone to keep it cemented together. These are the Cladoodontiforms, the like typical sharks, the probably apex predators of this particular Mississippian system. Cladotus is especially common from here. However, Cladotus has extreme taxonomic issues. It's the poster child for the cladodont tooth, that triangle, that very typical sharky thing. The problem with the name Cladotus is that it was used to describe every single cladodont tooth, including in some early 1800s papers, Megalodon from the Miocene as well. So the last time I read about the genus Cladotus, I think 96 species had to be synonymized out during a review. And even then, like the animals that are left, we still aren't 1000% sure that they all fit into the same genus. We just have our best guess. Cladotus bellifer, which is kind of hatchet-shaped, is from here, and there's another Cladotus elegans, I think. Elegans is actually matches a lot of more upper Carboniferous animals. This is Cyvotus, which is a upper Mississippian apex predator. Probably grew like as long as 30 feet. Mammoth Cave National Park recently reported on a brain case from Cyvotus among other Ctenacanthiforms. These are pretty findable in deposits, especially on the eastern side of the Illinois Basin. So the Mississippian and lower Pennsylvanian stuff of Indiana, for example. And I mean, they're huge. They, I want to say 3 inches long from in slant length. So from this outermost edge to here. The best way to notice the genus Cyvotus is this V-shaped way about the root, this V-shaped gestalt, as it were. We have a long, thin, probably piscivorous crown, and then we have the trident on the outside edge, these 2 large cusps with 18 to 20 little tiny cusps going in the middle. That's very, very typical for Cyvotus. There are other upper Mississippian animals. Some of them are serrated, some of them aren't, but Cyvotus, at least in like the Visaean and Tornasian, was probably like the main predator, or a Cladotus type animal that was similar to it. So keep an eye out for these. These are going to be the largest. These are going to be the heartbreaker teeth, where you want to find one and you get 80% of one, you get 70% of one. Next, we're on to the Eusulachians, specifically the Hybodontiforms. Eucelachians are the true sharks. These are the hybodonts and also the stingrays and the modern sharks as we know and love them today, which are called Neoselachians. Everything up to this point has been an elasmobranch, but is not particularly closely related to modern sharks. Cyvodus, for example, did not evolve into, Megalodon. It didn't evolve into Cretalamna during the Cretaceous. But these animals were more similar to that common ancestor. The main two are Leotis and Mesodmotus. These are long, loaf-shaped teeth with a little bit of gripping ability. This tooth down here is very typical of a more larger sized hybodontiform. This is named as Orotus cataneus, maybe. We'll talk about Orotus here in a minute, but just know that it's a species that is almost certainly a hybodontiform within the genus Orotus. That brings us to Orotus, the odd ones out. This is actually a pretty famous shark in the Illinois area because of the great white shark sized specimen preserved in the Pennsylvanian Mecca Shale from Indiana, which should still be on public display at the Field Museum. At least it was in the last few years that I've been there. Notice these large lophodont teeth, a lot of ridges. Some of these animals have tubercular dentine, which might imply that some of them are misplaced and should actually be holocephalians, but a large number of them are also elasmobranchs of some description. Down here in the bottom corner, this is Orotus mammillaris, the mammillons being these side cusps. Again, we have a lot of crushing, but maybe a little bit of gripping ability here. Another one that is plagued by problems relating to its early taxonomy. We have a very general shape. We've talked a lot about vaguely loaf-shaped teeth. If you look at our hybodont, if you look at Venustotus when they get very worn, if you look at Helotus. And to make matters worse, we have this genus was named kind of before we understood histological variations between the elasmobranchs and the holocephalians. And also we have a missing holotype. So when we name a new species of Orotus, the best thing we can do is find some other Orotus that we like and try to pin its characters in relation to those. However, the actual holotype tooth, which was reported by Agassiz in the 1840s, is like completely lost to time. No one's been able to find a specimen that matches the drawing that he did. So we struggle to put things into this bin when we don't really have the original example. And, to that end, added on the diversity that Chondrichthyans had during the Mississippian, we get a lot of Orotus. 3 or 4 Orotus species from this. I think at the end of the day, we had around 25 taxa from the bone bed as we examined it. Other vertebrates worth talking about, we have paleonisciform fishes. These were very toothy fishes covered in ganoid scales. Ganoid scales are not triangular, are rhomboid with like rhomboid shaped growth patterns within them. The teeth are pretty easy to recognize. They don't get very big, so don't expect them in your hand samples, but you will find them in residues. They're long, they're conical. Instead of being anti-posteriorly compressed like this, they're either conical or laterally compressed. So more like this, which is what you would imagine for like other bigger fishes. A lot of them also have, if you see in B on this upper right, they have a little bitty like enameloid tip. So it's like the cone of dentine ends and then the enamel continues on and just a little bit further. That's like a dead giveaway. They also sometimes have very weak cristae. And then among the other invertebrates, we also have weakly predatory acanthodians in the order Ischnacanthiformes. What we often find here are their teeth, which look very shark-like because they are either an outgroup to the elasmobranchs or a primitive elasmobranch. So they're very shark-like teeth. They're arranged into these whorls, and they don't really have like a super well-defined root, so they just all kind of interlock. Sometimes when these are beat up, they look like lungfish teeth because lungfish at this time also have like rows of bumps, but they form these very discrete whorls at the symphysis usually of the mouth. That's one of the things we often find. All right, before I jump into questions from you guys, real quick conclusions. The Illinois Basin has very high diversity of vertebrates in a whole number of layers. We could do a whole nother talk about the Devonian system, about Mason Creek, about Adestus, the coal shark from Pennsylvania, and its best friends or enemies, depending on what it ate. We're not super clear. And so just from zooming in this one thing, I hope I was able to impress upon you the complexities of vertebrate paleontology, especially in this region and in this bone bed, and also kind of give you guys a call to action. Vertebrate paleontology in the Paleozoic is kind of a niche science. There are not a lot of people working on it. At best guess, including grad students, I would say maybe a couple hundred paleontologists tops, but really probably more like 100 of us across the world. So the chances for, major earth-shattering discoveries are pretty high when we have these very, very base of the tree questions and very, very few people actually out in the field to work on it. So if you find something, get it identified, send it to me, send it to one of us at the club, and we can figure it out. And also with that, I'd just like to thank you guys, ESCONI. I don't know if you guys pronounce it as a word or not, but that's how I've been saying it in my head. And I'd like to thank my main academic homes right now, the Cincinnati Museum Center and the U.S. Forest Service. So with that, I'll take any questions you guys have.
Ryan,
Yeah,
do you need any more Bigsville stuff?
no. Short
Okay.
answer. Short answer, no. Long answer, get with my old advisor, Chuck Sampaglio, and I'm sure he would accommodate you. Nice.
That's from Bigsville.
So that has to be a Cyvodus. I'm struggling to find really good reports of Cyvodus, but like that has to be one, because I don't think Cladotus was as well. No Cladotus that is valid now is like that. Yeah, that's an excellent Bigsville block. I was talking about how like here in Iowa, everything's very dirty and clayey, but the teeth are still black. But once we get into Bigsville, it becomes very, very Bahamas very fast. There we go. That's either a Deltotus or a Sandalotus. Sandalotus is a genus that is difficult to talk about because some of its teeth were moved back into Deltotus and some of it weren't. Are these all stuff that you found?
I'm sorry?
Were these all stuff that you found, those blocks?
Yes, we found these just before they blasted out the bone bed.
Nice.
So
Yeah,
like I said, if anybody needs any slabs, I've got a few flats of semi-prepared to unprepared slabs to work on.
cool.
They can have them because I'm downsizing.
Okay. Yeah. Email me and we'll try to find a home for them.
All right.
The Sampaglio lab is starting a project right now where we're looking at tooth disparity. It's the actual like mathematical analysis of the overall shape of a tooth. And we're kind of doing that as a way to like really quickly barcode the hybodonts. There are probably another 30 or 40 new hybodont species floating around in this bone bed at this point. But we just want to look at what the diet of these animals was in a very quick, general, from orbit sense, so that we can start saying like, this is what Euselachians were up to without having to dive deep into the nitty gritty yet of naming new species. But we have Honig in his thesis, we have at least one new species. And I mean, I can think of another 2 or 3 that are sitting in Sampaglio's lab that.
Do you ever do a fractal analysis on any of these teeth?
We've talked about it. We might do it once David Peterman sets up a lab and do a deeper analysis, but
yeah,
I
need
think
to have a way to measure.
yeah, and there's the problem with fractals is that there's 1,000 ways to analyze 1,000 and get 1,000 things back. So like we could talk about just the crenellation of like Orotus cancellatus, but those are really only like at best 3rd order fractals where they branch once, twice, 3 times. And then what? It can be a problem to handle like the fractal dimension, especially in biology when it stands alone as a feature. But that is something we have talked about.
Right.
I had a question. Ryan, can you go to the slide where you showed the, and I'm probably going to say this wrong, the pedalodontiformes?
Formies. Don't worry about saying things wrong. I've been saying things wrong this whole time, probably. There we go.
Hey, when you were describing those, it looks like they're, I mean, I'm looking at them like they're upside down when the way you were describing them.
Oh, yes. So the upper portion of this photograph where you see these little spots, that's the actual like tubular dentine of the crown.
So
And these roots come down.
So those are the roots coming down. So how did they, because most of the teeth have the larger root and then with the crown. So how did they anchor in with all the space in between? Were they layered?
Kind of, they were organized. Let me get you a book really fast. They were organized into a system that we call tooth families. So think we've taken that very typical spiral that you see with teeth like coming out of a jaw, and we flatten it way out. Yeah, that'll do actually. And so in some of them they're arranged like pretty typically. This is Paleozoic ohioensis, but in others, especially in like the more stingray type body plans, we have these like complex systems of interlocking tooth families that kind of against each other.
Because I was just trying to figure that out in my head. How did that work? Because it looks like there would be large gaps, and I just couldn't quite understand.
Yeah.
As I was looking at them,
Yeah, and I mean, there's a lot of frontiers in even this. One of the best pedalodont groups we have is Genassa, which is these teeth.
Okay.
But the problem with Genassa is that it is extremely dorsoventrally compressed like a stingray, and its tooth families are so flattened and so depressed that they almost look more like stingray plates now anyway, which in an evolutionary sense is all well and good, but it's kind of like finding an Australopithecus with a unicorn horn for its head. It stems from a primitive lineage, but it's so derived from that primitive lineage that we struggle to figure out what Genassa means for all of the other pedalodonts.
Can you spell Genassa for me?
Yes, it's a J-A-N-A-S-S-A, I think.
Okay, thank you.
When it was originally named, the guy who named it thought it was a trilobite. So, don't give up on paleontology.
Hey, Ryan, I have a request. You introduced a great talk, by the way.
Thank you.
You introduced the topic very well, but we sort of started the recording on, I think, the 4th or 5th slide.
Yes.
For the purpose of just the recording, could you start the slides from the beginning so we can kind of review it, maybe if we look at the record another time?
Yes, so this is the title slide, just Paleozoic fishes of the Illinois Basin. And the Burlington Keokuk bone bed in particular, just to kind of zoom into this bigger complex thing and hopefully do a primer. Here's just a really quick, badly written, I found typos in it as I was reading it to you guys. Look at the timeline for the Paleozoic era. This is one of the Smithsonian's illustrations here. And then I think the recording started here. So I've been rambling a lot, but we hadn't really missed that many slides.
Thank you. And also, and I have a follow-up question. As a club, we used to collect at a quarry called Lone Star Quarry near Oglesby, Illinois, Pennsylvania limestone. And I understood they found an abundance of these flat crushing shark teeth, but I don't know what genus they would be. John, do you have an idea?
I have a guess. I would be almost certain that they were Sandalotus or Deltotus. It seems like Deltotus is a little bit more common in the early Mississippian, in the Mississippian, whereas the only super marine carbonates that I've been in the Pennsylvanian seem to be more Sandalotus. But I mean, we're talking about some super rare vertebrates from a very early time in Earth's history. Everything I say could be completely disproven by another quarry tomorrow.
I've collected at the site, I mean, years ago now, and never found a
I've-
tooth myself, but I saw people who had found them.
I've got a Sandilotus, a couple of Sandilotus from the Pennsylvanian of the Ozarks framed. If you want to look at them, maybe we can get a best recollection.
Guys, this was identified as Halotus simplex from Lone Star.
Interesting. I've never seen Helotus that big.
Now, I've got several in this one container. A long time ago, back in the day, Tom Williams and I used to collect at the not in the Bond Formation, but the above it. But I think it was the Mattoon or Modesto.
Okay.
Mattoon, I think it's Mattoon.
I didn't know the Mattoon cropped out anywhere.
Let's see. Yes, Mattoon Formation above the Bond, and there were times when we went to that area that was being planed off. They let the shale weather. We found over 400 teeth in a day.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. There some of those lags.
Yeah.
I mean, we see them in the elsewhere. We see them in the Cenozoic and Mesozoic as well. When the preservation is good, it's good. I think this is kind of a good rule of thumb for paleontology in general. The fossil record is incredibly spotty. The vast majority, that's a really good Ohioensis. The vast majority of animals
very
that died
cool.
do not appear in the fossil record. But if the preservation is good, every animal that dies is going to end up in that fossil record.
So, Brian, can you talk a little bit more about the starved platform and what the theory behind it? Because I've never heard that phrase used before.
Think of it like the Bahama Bank, the platform, big square platform of carbonate rising up from depth. And most of the carbonates that are being deposited are actually growing there, right? You have coral reefs that are laying down calcium carbonate. You have shelly faunas. You also have micro animals that are being deposited as like marine snow over top of it. And as different lagoons and stuff get cut off and temperatures vary and pHs vary, you get piezooliths and you get ooids and other little things. But all of this is like a chemical precipitation process that is happening from the ocean. And when you get a platform where, for whatever reason, maybe the water got too deep, maybe the water got too cold or too hot, the precipitation of calcium carbonate drops for a substantial period of time, then the sediment load, the total sediment load is going to drop off. Like we're not getting any Mississippi River mud flowing into the Bahamas. And if we stopped growing carbonates in the Bahamas, we're not going to see a layer of mud. That those silicates that are coming off of the continent just don't go that far out, unless you count the occasional like turbidite or volcanic eruption. So when that happens, other animals start to show up a little bit more often in the fossil record. Animals that are swimming over that platform, when they drop body parts, when they die, they become an increasing percentage of the total sediment load that's going down. Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, so that's kind of what I meant. And even then, it seems like there is some solid evidence to support that that's what's happening in the Burlington Keokuk, but there is other evidence that points in other directions. I think a starved platform has to be a percentage of what is happening. I think we're not just seeing like density sorting, for example, where like a storm or a wave is coming through and like panning for gold, just spreading all the shark teeth out because they're of a similar density. It should also be worth mentioning that the like geographic extent of this bone bed is really something else. It might be that we just don't understand vertebrate deposition in the ocean the way we think we do, but just from the few sites that I know about where this crops out, the polygon that you can make is several tens of miles. And probably if we core sectioned everything, we would find this bone bed over several hundred miles. And it's in a way baffling to me to imagine going to a shallow ocean, swimming down 30 feet, reaching into the muck and pulling out a shark tooth and realizing that it's also this rich in shark teeth a mile that way, a mile that way, and a mile that way, you know?
Yeah. So what is the theory on what caused something like that to happen?
I'm not 100% aware, but off the top of my head, I know that Pangea was slowly starting to come together at this time. We weren't actually having any of the main orogenies that built Pangea, but continents were moving, so there could be some volcanic activities, there could be some marine acidification events or other marine temperature or salinity changes. It's a little bit of a cop-out in ocean geology, though, to say the salinity must have changed and that's why this happened, because it's very difficult to test that. But also, and this kind of like Pangea, this comes a little bit later, but we do see a more tropical, subtropical ocean starting to move north, or not ocean, but the continental shelves that were riding along with these continents. So presumably it was getting warmer and warmer as time wore on. But also I assume that these basins were filling up. I think the reason why Illinois does not have a lot of deposited Permian is probably that in the Permian, there was no deposition happening. So we see everything, we see such a good record going all the way up. And then when we get to the top, it's just kind of gone. I could be wrong about that. I know there's some Permian in core samples in the Michigan Basin, and of course the Dunkard Basin is loaded with terrestrial Permian, but it could just be that, you know, dynamics of waters and depositions in the basin had just changed.
Thank you.
Ryan, have you been down to the Shawnee National Forest yet?
Yeah, I did a vertebrate paleo survey in the winter of 2021.
Okay. So do you know Joe DeVera?
I don't know that I do. The name sounds familiar, but I can't place it.
So Joe DeVera works for the State Geological Survey, and he lives down in Carterville.
Cool.
And he's a prime contact for many of us in that area. And I used to live in that area for several years.
Cool.
He helps out a lot with access to places, and he's also working with a couple of other researchers that we as a club know. Arjun Mann from the Smithsonian and Jason Pardo from the Field Museum, and they're working more on Mississippian tetrapod material.
Okay.
But I'm sure that you will meet him, or I can introduce you to him at some point.
Yeah, it would be interesting, especially if I'm going to be doing field work back in there. It seems like the Shawnee is pretty marine when it comes to the Mississippian. And it also seems like, I don't know, I didn't do great with vertebrates when I was there, but I think a lot of that is because the best exposure is done in quarries, and a lot of the quarries are super old. But at some point, I would like to do some bulk dissolutions on the Shawnee. It's a little bit tricky on federal land, though, because we have an obligation to care for specimens once we recover them. So if I do cook down a 5-gallon bucket and I end up with 100 teeth, I now have to find a permanent loaner home for these teeth.
I'm sure the Field Museum would love to help you out in that respect.
Yeah, I would hope so.
I would think so. Yeah, let me get you connected with Joe DeVera, and he can help you out at some sites down there that are not on federal land.
Yeah, that'd be super cool. I know the Cretaceous Tertiary is out there somewhere, and I strongly suspect if we worked hard enough, we could find bloat and float dinosaur material in the Shawnee somewhere.
Well, yeah,
But
that's a little tough. I can tell you because I've looked, and because I used to live there, and I went to a place called Black Powder Hollow, which is the Cretaceous McNary formation, and I took a bunch of 5-gallon buckets and I screen washed them and didn't come up with anything vertebrate whatsoever out of it.
Yeah, it would be an adventure. And I mean, the plant life there can be a struggle too, because that's such a endangered species hotspot, another like federal threatened and endangered hotspot. Last time I was out there looking in the Cretaceous, I got lost for like half a day in this massive pile of ferns that seems to like to grow over the Cretaceous, at least in part. I need to just hit it again, but who knows when I'm going to be down there. I mean, I'm doing federal trainings for how to use a ladder and how to use a drill all next week. So who knows when I'm going to actually be in the field as part of this new job.
Ryan, I don't suppose you're thinking of coming to Maps Expo in October?
We will see. I think
Because Joe will be there.
cool.
He sets up a booth at Expo every year. Joe
Cool.
and Russ Jacobson.
Cool. Yeah, if I can get time and money to go, I think I have money through my home agency to travel to at least one conference a year. And that might be more useful for work. I was talking earlier about how GSA is normally the main one that I go to, but I don't have any data to present because I missed all the deadlines. So maybe Maps would be a better one.
And you really won't find a better field geologist or stratigrapher than Joe DeVera for the area down there. He is
That is what we need.
notch.
Cool.
Yeah, one of the places where I've sampled material and dissolved it was the Route 146 road cut, which is Mississippi and Haney limestone of Golconda Formation.
Okay.
And came out with a few specimens of Bransonella nebraskensis.
Now, that is an interesting shark. There are two Bransonella form sharks, Bransonella and Barb Clabornia, and all of them are tiny little two-pronged thingies. But so it was thought to be a very small fish. You can actually go to rock shops online, and occasionally they'll sell an entire Barb Clabornia dentition for like $100, and it's like a little mount with just like a circle of teeth. But I think back in the 80s, one of those really foundational workers, Zangirl maybe, he found a paleoquadrate in Texas that belonged to, the paleoquadrate is this bone, that belonged to Barb Clabornia. And it was like 1.5 feet long, studded with several thousand teeth. So it turns out, instead of being like a small minnow that ate other minnows, a lot of these Bransonelliforms were actually large-bodied filter feeders in the like whale shark vein of body plans. Yeah, I've always wanted a good site for Barb Clabornia. I think they start in the middle Pennsylvania. The type species is Ludersensis, which comes from the Luders limestone, which is where I did my PhD dissertation. But Barb Clabornia seems to like estuary and freshwater ecosystems better. And I was like way out to sea at my site.
Would it be okay if I share my screen?
Yeah, go for it.
I think you need to stop sharing yours first.
Nice. That is such a Bransonella.
Yeah, well, unfortunately, I don't have an SEM, so I have a little bit of depth of field problems with it. But
yeah, my old boss, Chuck Sampaglio, started doing a thing called image stacking for a lot of his publications. And the way you do it, I'm gonna have to sum this up a lot because I mostly don't do it and trust him. But
I know how to do image stacking.
Cool. Yes,
Like
Russell.
I can explain if you want. I don't know if that's
nah, I'm just gonna run through it fast. So
okay.
Here's Bransonella. For those of you who really want to get into sharks, this thing, the Handbook of Paleoichthyology, is the Bible. This is just the volume for Paleozoic sharks as of 2010, just for Paleozoic shark teeth. And as you can see, it's very thin, but it's got the info. So anyway, with image stacking, you get a very, very narrow focal plane. I'm talking like microns. And a lot of times people will get a secondary attachment to attach a microscope objective lens onto a macro lens. And then you bring the object out of focus, and then it's on a bellows or like a screw system where it'll bring it up like 100 to 500 microns at a time. And then you just rig the camera to fire every single time it comes up. And then you use software. I think Image Stacker is the main software, at least that he uses, and it'll stitch it together so it's a uniformly in focus tooth. And the resolution is as good as SEM's, at least at this size, at the 100 to 1,000 microns size, but it'll all be true color.
We use that a lot with insects, photographing insects.
Nice. It's a big thing. The big thing that I'm excited for is using it in the world of like conodont research, because it turns out that there are two main histologies of mineralized bone in a conodont, and some of it is like milky and opaque and whitish, and some of it is like very, very shiny and like crystalline. And the ratio of what to what, or where the high density stuff ends and the low density stuff begins, is actually a cladistically useful trait in many conodont species. However, in the SEM world, everything is coated in gold and palladium, so you can't actually see into the tooth to know where that dense crap is. So for, I don't know when SEMs were invented, the last 50 years of conodont papers, anytime anyone describes that feature, it's just gonna have to pass peer review, you know? We either can't be describing new species with this trait, or we can just trust the researcher.
That image stacking is essentially what Collada used for every picture in the book.
Nice. Yeah, I love the idea. I love the idea of doing image stacking for slightly bigger stuff too.
It's
This
really nice because you set it up and you go do something else, and it just
Yeah.
automatically does everything for you.
Yeah, and I mean, you really need to, because I've done like Kuliella, which is a primitive Neosalacian that's like maybe 200 microns at its biggest. And if you're like walking around fiddling with crap, that vibration will show up.
So Dave, what is
Yeah.
this one?
It's what he just said. It's Kuliella.
Nice. I
That's-
love Kuliella is another one of those like Lucy with a unicorn horn type fossils, because we know histologically it's a Neosalacian. It is more similar to all modern sharks and rays than it is to any other Paleozoic shark. But A, it seems to show up in the Devonian. So like, how neo are these Neosalacians? And B, its root is this crazy like tongue and groove system that like does this and has a weird foramen rotated all the way down, and they must have like lock and keyed into each other. That's a good picture. So we have one of the most primitive lineages of all modern sharks, but does it actually contain characteristics of all modern sharks? Hell no, it's doing its own thing.
So I'm going to ask a really dumb question here. For me, it feels dumb, but since all there is in the fossil records are the teeth, and the one you thought was a real minnow turns out to be a much larger, how I hate to ask it this way, but how accurate are the images of what?
Are you talking like the reconstructions of what these animals are?
Right.
Some of them are just not accurate. Some of them are probably not as accurate as we think that they are. We can do a pretty good job with like phylogenetic bracketing. There's a lot of research championed by John Maisie in the 90s and up, and a lot of his graduate students are still out and around today. Ditto for Michael Coates at the University of Chicago. We're getting a better sense of bodies. We're getting a better sense of brain cases and how jaws fit onto those brain cases. But you know, the chances that it turned out that Kuliella was secretly the size of a T-Rex are not zero until we can get a really good sense of the body and of these brain cases. I think there might be some body fossils of that family the Anachronistidae known. So we can kind of phylogenetically bracket our guesses into what they looked like. But we can't always do that. The petalodontiforms are a really good example of this. One petalodontiform, Janassa, was basically a stingray, comparable to a stingray in its body plans, probably in the crap that it ate too. But Petalotus, the like poster child, the type species of this entire order, we don't really have a good idea of what its body looked like. And to complicate matters further, in the Bear Gulch Lagerstadt, we have another petalodontiform called Beltantia. I can't remember exactly, but it has like, its body is kind of similar to a stonefish or a shallow water anglerfish, where it had this big, puffy, Barney as a dinosaur body that presumably looked like a sponge or something, and a forward-facing mouth instead of a downward-facing mouth. So that means just among this one order of animals, the petalodontiformes, we have like crazy variation in body plans. So yeah, it's a very real frontier. Another thing that is interesting, we talked about Samotus in my talk with the square teeth arranged into a pavement. We know that they were arranged into a pavement, but we don't actually know the order of that pavement. We don't know if they were like tessellated or if it was just squares like on a checkerboard, or if there were like multiple rows. And this is silly because we even have chunks of like the Meckel's cartilage and the palatoquadrate. There's one specimen where like the jaw is like twisted and spread out by depositional processes. So like we have an idea of where to begin to piece this animal back together, but the work hasn't been done. And so even though we have a sense of what's going on, you know, animals like Kuliella, animals like Bransonella and Barclabornia tell us that having a sense of what's going on is just not enough sometimes.
Here's a tooth from Kansas. It's a Permian shark. Let me get it in focus here.
Now you're talking my language. Oh, that is Glickmanius occidentalis. That's the apex predator. You said from Kansas, right? From like the Tuttle Creek area?
Not far from Tuttle Creek, a little bit west of there, Manhattan.
Yeah, those road cuts out there. That's those are apparently the biggest that Glickmanius gets are out there. I mean, I've seen them like 2 inches plus. They presumably evolved into Kaibabo-venator of the Kaibab limestone, which is basically a Glickmanius that is serrated. I wish I had some stuff out unpacked. But yeah, Glickmanius is.
I was gonna say this has those little teeth on this, or those little cusps, or whatever you call them on the sides.
Yep. It's got
like
the two big cusplets, and sometimes they have like one in the middle. Glickmanius is one of the first genera that was actually pulled out of Cladotus. For the longest time, it was Cladotus occidentalis, and then I think there was one other, Miachcavensis. And they were all in Cladotus forever until 2005, and they were pulled out. But even then, there's a lot going on with Glickmanius. I have a book somewhere where someone accidentally misspoke in the prose and said that there were Ototus obliquus teeth in Manhattan, Kansas. And I remember circling that in the book and being like, well, he's not that wrong if you talk about size. Yeah, those are some of my favorite teeth. My dissertation was in the Acelian on up to the Kungurian, just shark faunas as they changed over the earliest Permian. And so I found myself discussing Glickmanius an awful lot.
Hey, Ryan, I just wanted to say we enjoyed your presentation here, and it was quite timely because I have a couple people here working on Paleozoic sharks, Dr. Chris Duffin and Dr. David Ward.
Hey guys.
And so we when you were talking earlier, I said, oh, do you know that book? And Chris says, yeah, I wrote it.
Yeah, big sections of it for sure. We talked, Chris, about something in Russia a few years ago, but I can't remember what thing. cephalic hooks off of holocephalians in the Cretaceous.
Oh, yes, yes, the denticles on the underside of the frontal claspers and the tenaculum in the pelvic region, probably. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a group of people working in the field out there, and one day they will find the right specimen, but it always seems like the claspers that they pull out of there are way too beat up to really understand.
Yeah. Yeah.
We were actually trying to track down a cast of a tooth that I had gotten, and we were told it was at Wright State. So I think we're the same lab you're talking about, and we're gonna work on tracking that down.
Is it the cast of the big Edestus?
I guess it's Odus variabilis.
Oh. I don't know of that cast.
It was from
could be,
Moline, Illinois.
it could be squirreled away, but I don't know. I hope it is. I hope you guys find it.
Yeah.
We recently redid all the collections back there with old Smithsonian cabinets. The Smithsonian got rid of their wood and I guess that's steel or aluminum. The really old timey ones, they got rid of those by giving them to the North Carolina State Museum. And when North Carolina got money to switch to metal cases, they threw away like 1,000 of these like 1 meter cube specimen boxes. And so we redid all of our collections with those 2-3 years ago. Yeah, I'm sure Chuck has it squirreled away somewhere. I just can't think of where it would be.
Yeah, it's a huge tooth, and we're just trying to track it down and see what the story was. If it was an isolated tooth, or is there more? You know,
was it found in the Pennsylvanian?
Yes.
Okay. I think I might know the tooth that you're talking about, but I can think of a very, very large, about this wide tooth that was either in that it looks in my memory like a Agassiz variabilis, but I can't remember what it was labeled as.
Yeah, I don't know that what I have of the cast had any label with it. So
yeah.
Anyway, good.
Yep.
Yeah.
Anyway,
how long are you guys visiting the US for?
Oh, well, we're actually looking at Agassiz Odus, amongst some other things, some Jurassic chimeroids as well. Just
cool.
Lots of interesting things here.
Nice. It sounds pretty cool.
I have a question.
Yeah.
How could any fossilized teeth, like shark teeth, could tell how big it is?
Short answer, yes. Long answer, yes, but it's very, very, very complex and difficult.
Because it's only sort of teeth, right?
Yeah,
No
and I mean,
skeleton or body of it.
yeah, and I think it's fair to say that the bigger the shark, or rather the bigger the tooth, the bigger the shark. However, you know, we talked about with barb clabornia that we can't just make these like shoot from the hip things assumptions like with every species. So it's kind of species specific, and even then, I don't know if there's a good way to just code slant length in tooth to a shark's total body. It'll depend on position of the mouth. It'll depend on, 1,000 other factors. But, in general, the bigger the megalodon, the bigger tooth that it had. But when we're working in the Paleozoic, there's so much variation in body size that I don't know how well you can do that and maintain correctness.
Could I partly field that question?
Yeah, go for it.
David Ward, Natural History Museum, London. It's with Megs, it's relatively simple. Assuming you've got access to a picture or the actual an associated dentition. Basically, the relationship between the width of a shark's mouth and its length to the tip of its tail is usually about 8:1. If you add the tail on, it's about 10:1. So you've got to work out how wide the actual jaw, the gape of the jaws is. And if you look at most sharks, large carcharinids, lamniforms, Atodus, as in Atodus obliquus or Atodus megalodon, they all more or less follow the same rules. They all have a fusiform, body. So what you need to do is just work out roughly what sort of tail you'd stick on it. So an Alopius will have a massive tail, a sand shark, a medium-sized one, an advanced lamniform, a short one, and multiply the width of the mouth by the appropriate amount. Now, how do you work out the width of the mouth? Is, well, if you've got a megalodon, for instance, if you can work out roughly where it is in the dentition, and if the dentition, shall we say, is there's plenty of published illustrations. If the dentition is about a meter across, and your megalodon is in its position is, shall we say, 10 centimeters across, you just multiply up. You work out how big the whole thing would have been, and then multiply it by about 10, and there you go. That will give you the average meg at about something like 15 to 20 meters, depending on how massive it is. Height, slant height, no, this does not work because there's too great a variation depending on dart and I think and environment to be accurate. So, Gordon Hubble wrote a paper on great white sharks a while back and showed that the height wasn't actually a useful factor, but width is, because it's relatively easily calculated. So if anyone really wants to do this in any detail, you can contact me and I can send you a sort of worksheet we use for outreach, where we do this with kids. We take a large meg and we work out how big it is. It's great fun, and it gives the kids an idea of what they're dealing with.
That's awesome.
Yeah, that'll be really useful.
So I don't know, I've never shared a screen before, so I'm not sure if I know how to do it. I wanted to show something.
Go to share screen and
And-
look for the
okay.
application that is,
All right,
I'm
I
assuming
see
it's
it.
an image. Select the application that has the image and there you go.
These are two I found recently. I know they're not as old as the ones we've been talking about, but
Where did you find those?
I found those
Where at?
in a bucket of sand.
And where's the sand from?
The sand was from a friend brought back from Galveston, Texas.
Galveston has, I think, like Pleistocene beaches, I think. I've never hunted there.
I believe these were found at Crystal Beach.
Has anyone done any shark tooth stuff in coastal Texas?
No, they're teeth of Carcharinus, but I don't know which species, and they're pretty evidently neogene, but that's, I think, as far as one can go without knowing a lot more about the geology.
Yeah.
Carcharinus whaler shark.
But I was real excited to find them in all the sand.
Oh yeah, I would.
You need to get more sand.
I
For
know.
sure.
She's gonna get me some more.
Well, we need to be constructing a dentition of those.
Okay, I have one more.
And
to
you
go.
need a sieve to find the small teeth. You know, a sieve to separate the sand from the teeth.
It
For
took a
sure.
long time. Here's another one.
How big is that?
I think I've got a picture of it. Hold on, let me see. I think I've got a picture of it on a penny.
Could that be like a really lateral blue shark, maybe?
It is very, very tiny.
For you.
I may not have a, I know I do somewhere. While you keep talking, I'm gonna see if I can find the picture of it on a penny.
It's smaller than a penny.
Oh yeah, it's much smaller. I mean, it fits like, it doesn't even, I mean, I'm gonna have to find it because it is very tiny. These were in grains of sand and I was going through them with the loop and sorting way down to, you know,
Do you think
down to
that
macro
it is-
levels.
Do you think that it is serrated all the way to the tip? Or-
I believe it is. I can put that picture back up, but I can't do the picture back up and then find the other picture. So let me look a little bit closer. Because I was trying to get pictures of all of them on a penny for size reference. But it is very tiny. We're talking really small. And I don't believe I have it on a penny, on that one. I have got the other ones on pennies.
I mean, I don't know. I would open the floor to IDs at this point. I think it's probably like a Carcharinus, but there are a couple of partially serrated Carcharinuses out there.
But it was in grains of sand, so it is very, very small.
Interesting.
Let me pull it up again. So it doesn't quite go, the serration doesn't go quite up to the tip, but close. And then there's a little bit on this side.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, it's too lateral too.
So I can do, I mean, I'll be happy to send pictures. I'll take some more pictures of it on a penny for size reference. But it's as big as it's not any bigger than the other two.
Lee Creek Guide is the best one.
You do have a couple penny shots in there. You can just go ahead and select them.
So it's about the same size as these.
Okay.
Oh.
Still,
But I've been having a lot of fun sorting through sand. Friends have been sending me sand from all over.
nice.
Okay, I think that's a juvenile tooth of a small a Carcharinus, but I think you'll find it fairly difficult to get an ID because the lateral teeth, as that is, of juveniles all tend to look more or less the same. I think if you talk to someone that actually collected there, they'd probably have larger teeth, the adults, and from that you get an identification. But it's a great thing to find, and you need to go down there or get a sieve, get a few more.
The real question now is how many 100-kilogram buckets per shark tooth? And also, if it's loose sand, that kind of doesn't matter as much anymore because the speed of sifting will be easy.
Well, and it's so small. I mean, it could have been floating anywhere, you know.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel like I might be thinking of Corpus Christi instead, but I feel like the shark teeth that I've seen out there are from the Pleistocene, but I just can't remember exactly where I read that.
This is somebody kind of led me into the direction that the two are from a requiem shark. But I'm obviously no expert at all.
Yeah, a requiem shark is a Carcharinid. It's
Oh,
Carcharinid
well, see.
fetus. So we're talking the same thing.
See, and I didn't even know that, so thank you.
At this point, I'm going to stop recording, but we can continue this conversation as long as Ryan is willing and able.
Okay, what time is it right now?